What's up, everyone? I'm back for the final recap of the 2021 World Open. I am actually home already, as you can see from the different background. I drove home from Philly back to Jersey as soon as my final round finished. How I did in that we will get to. But first we have round 8, the morning round, the penultimate round of the tournament. And I was white paired up against another kid, like 15 or 16, rated about 2100. And here we go. Played e4, and I knew he was going to play the Najdorf. Pretty much the only sort of intel I had on him. And that was enough, because I played, h3, the Adams attack. We got to get one of these games in at least like every tournament. And he goes e5. I go back to e2. And here he played bishop e6. He did not play the sort of critical anti-Adams attack line with h5, which is just objectively like the best way to play for black. He played bishop e6, which allows me, of course, to play g4, the whole point of the Adams attack. And now I just get, my standard game plan, bishop g2, I castle, and, first 10 moves, pretty much all theory, pretty much all, things that I've played before, very comfortable with this position. And now it's sort of time to start thinking. Basically, the main ideas for me is I can go knight d5, and I can go knight g3, and try to put the knight on f5. And maybe I should have started with knight g3, but I decided to go with knight d5 first. My thinking was that if he were to take, as they sometimes do, and then castle, well then I play knight g3 now, and basically he can't stop me from putting the knight on f5, right? Because he can't go g6, or I would just snipe his pawn on h6. And he thought here after knight d5 for a while. I think he was like looking at h5 maybe to sort of like, take advantage of the fact that I've already castled, but I have these like extended pawns, The only real downside of the Adams attack is that when I push these pawns, but then I castle kingside, it can leave my, king and the structure around it a little bit vulnerable. So I think he was looking at this, and maybe he saw this. If he takes and puts the bishop here, I was just going to play knight g3. And like maybe black is just fine here, honestly, because, these pawns aren't that scary. I have to probably play h4 to protect this pawn. Maybe he should have gone for this. I have a feeling that he was calculating it, but he decided just to, he decided to play knight c5, actually. Another thing he could have done was, just castle, I guess. But then, I would have just continued with my plan of knight g3. So he decided to play knight c5 to attack the e4 pawn. But I said, okay, knight g3, it protects the pawn. I was going to go there anyway. And now he played rook c8. And the fact that he was delaying castling basically told me, I got to press him now. His king is still in the center. And I gotta light things up. So I thought for about 10 minutes and went for f4. We're going for him. Basically, the idea is I'm trying to open up the f-file for the rook. And if he were to take the pawn, I can take a number of ways. Simplest is probably just take by bishop. And now I have some pressure against d6. I'm threatening just basically take the bishop and then take the pawn. Like, for example, if he castles, I just go boom, and I go boom. And I'm winning a pawn, and I'm skewering him. So he doesn't want to take. I think what he could have just done, honestly, is just sort of ignored me and played b5. Or just, something where he doesn't actually, take or play into sort of my idea. Because even though I have these pawns, it's not really clear that I have something concrete here. If I play g5, he can just trade and then maybe trade here and then drop his bishop back. And my rook is eyeing the pawn. But if I play queen f3, I think he can even just castle. Although this looks actually pretty good for me. I'm not sure. Maybe he doesn't have to take. Maybe he can just go back with the knight. It feels like, okay, yeah, I have the open f-file, but he's also attacking my pawn here. So it's very double-edged. Another thing I could have gone for is maybe take this pawn and then try to put the knight on f5. But then, if we have this trade, it opens the bishop up, but also, look how open my king is. A little bit iffy. So, but what he did, though, he took the knight. I took. Then he took here. I took. And I was happy at this point. I'm like, things are opening up for me. You know, my rook is open. The e-file is now open. He castled. Like, I mean, he had to get his king out of the center. I played knight f5. Finally getting my knight to that key square that it wants to get to. Pressuring his king side. And here I believe what he should have done was like something like maybe knight h7 and try to put the knight or the bishop on g5. That's what I was thinking he was going to do. But he played the move rook e8. And now we have an early critical position. White to move. And what did I play here? The move I played here is the move, bang, bishop takes h6. Honestly, this might be one of the highlights of the tournament, which is kind of sad because all it really does is wins a pawn. He did not take the bishop back. Spoiler alert, he played bishop f8. The point being is that if he were to take the bishop, I take with the knight, would check. And he has to put his king, I mean, probably on g7, right? If he puts it on h8, I take, and I'm forking his king and queen. So, and if he goes king f8, I go g5. And I'm hitting the knight, and he can't move it because then this is actually mate with the rook and the knight. So king g7 probably his best bet, but I still play g5, and he's in trouble. Like, his knight's hit, pawn is under attack, and, you know, all I really calculated was basically to the point that here and here, and I saw that once his king is on g6, because if it goes to h8, I just play g6 as well, threatening g7 mate and rook takes h7 mate. I saw that once his king ends up here, like, I didn't see a concrete knockout here, but I knew that this is winning. I mean, look at his king. I have two pieces around him. His king is wide open. Like, I don't have an immediate check because his knight covers this, but I knew, like, I just played queen g4, and it should be lights out. And I looked at it a bit after the game, and, you know, I was correct. But it's funny that, you know, after knight takes, I stared at this position for a while, and I could tell that there has to be something. And I even, like, just looked to see what the engine says, and the engine said here, mate in 2. And I look at this position, and I can't lie, it took me, like, more than 5 minutes to find the mate in 2 here. And the funny thing is that it's a silent killer mate in 2. Can you find the move here? How white wins? Queen f5 check doesn't work because rook h7 would be mate if not for the knight. No. The correct move in this position is bishop f3. And there's no way to stop queen h5 mate. Unbelievable. Any move black plays, absolutely any move, will be met with queen h5 checkmate, including just king taking mate. And there's a lot of cool mates here. I mean, one I can show you is if he plays queen d7, trying to trade the queens off, check, check. He can't take the knight because this is checkmate. King here, and now watch. We have check, 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 check. And can you find the mate in 2 from here? Check. And checkmate. So those are the kinds of things I would have had to calculate if it got to that point. But my opponent, you know, he correctly made the practical decision not to take, just to accept the fact that he's losing a pawn and just to go back with the bishop and defend. You know, saying, okay, like, I'm down a pawn, but, you know, it's not the biggest pawn in the world. It's just a pawn on h6. And, like, yeah, it does give me some advantage. The fact that I now have the g5 square, that's the move I played, bishop g5 here. But, you know, it's not the end of the world for him. And here he went back with the knight to defend. And I just felt like, you know, I have a good position. I have him under pressure. But, you know, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to break through here because my position is quite loose. You know, this diagonal leading up to the king is completely open. You know, he obviously wants to put a queen here. Well, how did I make that arrow yellow? Oh, okay, weird. Yeah, my king is open. He might have ideas of putting a knight on e5. You know, his rook is open. Like, he does have some sources of counterplay potentially. So in this position, I play the move b3, anticipating this check, which he still gave. And here I played king h1, you know, just getting the king out of the check. But the funny thing is that little did I know how this move, king h1, I had a choice here. I could have gone to h1 or to h2. I kind of just said, okay, king h1, it's off this diagonal, it's off this diagonal, nothing can potentially touch the king, it should be safe here, but just wait. So in this position, he played g6, which I thought was a mistake, because now I go check, and he has to take, because, if he doesn't, then, what was I going to do here? Oh, I can take, and then play g5, and I'm going to win the piece back, and, he's again, under a huge pressure with this, I think queen f3 should just be almost winning here. He can defend this way, but in this position looks just like it should be winning for white, because I have the pin, and I'm going to put more pressure on him. So he couldn't not take. But once he did, I was thinking, okay, I got the two bishops. He just weakened the structure around the king. I'm doing great. And now he played rook e5, which struck me as kind of a weird move. Because I was thinking, is he trying to bait me to attack his rook and then just going to sacrifice it to create a blockade? Kind of like I did in my last game. So I attacked him, but then he just went right back. And I was like, okay, what is this guy doing? And now I came up with an interesting idea. My bishop on f4, it's decent, but if I could put this bishop anywhere, where would it be? Well, the answer is on b2, because I want it to be on the long diagonal. And how does it get to b2? By going to c1 first. And I was thinking, okay, I'm about to light him up here. I'm one move away. I'm going to put the bishop here, hit the knight. I'm going to somehow bring the queen in, maybe maneuver it somehow, kick his queen out, put it on d4, maybe somehow get it around this way. My position is just great. But now he started to create some counterplay. He played queen b4. I was like, okay. His idea is clearly to play knight e4, so that the knight is supported by queen and rook. But I said, okay, bishop e2. He jumped in with the knight. And, I don't want to take, because then he takes a check. And my king is very open, and I can't block the check because he takes, and then he takes here, and now he's better. He's breaking in. So I played queen f3, actually threatening mate in 1 on f7. He defended it. And now I played c4, cutting the queen off from the knight, and it looks like he can go here and fork me. But what I was relying on, the fact that I could play the move bishop c3. And if he takes my queen, I take his queen, and I'm hitting this pawn. And I'm just better here. I'm just going to be, with the bishop pair and up 2 pawns soon. So I was thinking, okay, I'm doing well. And then he played queen d2, which I had seen, and I thought that in this position I play rook e1, and he would take my bishop, I'd take his knight, and then maybe we trade, and he can sort of block me, but maybe I can just go back with the queen and, stop him from taking the pawn, and if we trade, we go into this endgame where I'm up a pawn and I have a bishop for a knight. Not clear that it's going to be an easy win, but, still a good position for me. Except that when I saw this move queen d2, and I was starting to think, in preparation of playing rook e1, I'm like, wait a minute, does he have anything else here? And I realized that on rook e1, he's not going to actually take my bishop. Instead, he has an absolutely disgusting trick here. And remember when I said I should have put my king on h2 earlier? Well, when I saw what he was about to do, I actually started just fuming inside, because I was like, if I had just put the king on h2, he would not have the following move, knight f2 check. And the point is that it opens a discovered attack on the rook. And if I take, he takes, and then he takes on e1. And I'm losing the exchange. And I still have the bishop pair, but I don't want to lose the exchange and go into this endgame. And if I take by rook, same thing. He takes my rook. I have to move the king. And again, I have the bishop pair, but he's up the exchange. So, if I get hit with this check, what do? I'm just going to lose the rook. And, yeah, that was very, frustrating, because up to this point, I thought, I'm better. I have a good position. And then I realized that I can't even play rook e1. And I was getting low on time at this point too. Like I had 12 minutes, and there was still like eight minutes left to make the time control. Now, is it possible that I missed some defense here? Yeah, it's possible. And actually, I want to do, after I'm done with this, recap series, I'm going to make an additional video, sort of like breaking down what I actually learned, specific moments to learn from each game. Because right now I'm giving you my kind of post thoughts, but I haven't really like analyzed it that deeply, and I haven't checked anything with the engine really. So you're just kind of getting my raw thoughts right now, and there might be things that I'm missing. But anyway, back to the game. So I had to play bishop c1 because I wasn't going to fall for any tricks. He went back to his queen, and now I started harassing his queen all over the place. And eventually I just had to get my king to g1. Because again, if I play rook a1, e1 here, I fall for this trick. So I play king g1, and he plays rook e8. I play rook e1 finally, he takes my pawn. And at this point, I had about 10 minutes, and I just felt like my advantage is slipping here. We're actually back to equal material now. And what do I do? I mean, I'm just kind of stuck. Like, my bishop on g2 is very passive. And now, I was getting low on time, so I decided to do something risky. I sacrificed the exchange. He obviously had to take back. And now I considered taking this pawn, but I thought, okay, he just plays f6, and I didn't really see a breakthrough here. I just thought that, like if I move my queen out of the way, he goes here, and yeah, I don't really know. I don't really think there's much here. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe this was actually what I should have done, and just use the fact that I have the pass pawns, like the d pawn, and tried to do something. Or maybe there was something else here. Like, again, I don't know. I'm going to have to really, sit on this position for a bit. But anyway, the move I played here was not bishop takes d6. It was actually bishop e5. A very unexpected move that threatens mate in 1. And cuts the connection between the rooks. And the point is that, what I was thinking is if he takes, I take here, and then I take the knight. And he can go here attacking my bishop, but I'm just going to sidestep, and this position is very unclear, very sharp. I'm down the exchange, but look at where my queen is. Very actively placed. It's pressuring the rook, pressuring the pawn. His king is pretty unsafe, and I was thinking this is at least enough for a draw. And he, again, made a practical decision not to go into anything super sharp and dangerous. He just took with the knight. And I took the rook, and he took my pawn. And now, again, my position here is not great. I'm down to 8 minutes. He had, 11 or 12 still. And so I had to do something active. This is one area of the game in which I think I excel. And, one area of the game where I perform well in the tournament is that when I'm under pressure, I just manage to, I just know how to complicate the position well enough so that my opponent, loses their advantage, basically. And I played the move c5. And I'm giving up another pawn to play d6, and I'm breaking through. The point is just, even though I'm down a bunch of pawns, my bishop and queen are open on this diagonal. And he went back to attack the pawn, and I defended it with rook d1. And now I'm just trying to support my pass pawn here. And in this position, he actually made a mistake. What he should have done, I think, is just gone back to c6 with the knight. And, if I push the pawn, he can just, he can take my queen, actually. Yeah, I can't even push the pawn. I would have to maybe, go back with the queen. But I think he can just blockade me here, and, I'm stuck. And eventually he's going to start pushing these queenside pawns. But he messed up by playing rook d8. Because now I simply take, and he realized here that he cannot take back because I would have check. Hitting the rook and hitting the king. So he played king g7, but now I took this pawn. And now basically I've managed to equalize things. Both of us have 3 pawns, queen and rook. I have bishop, he has knight. And what I was expecting to happen is he might play something like knight c4, and maybe we trade the pawns in some way, something like this. But instead he found an interesting way to basically force a draw here. He sacked the knight on g4. and I took, and his point was that he gives a check, and I have to go to f1, because if I go to h2, I'm getting mated all of a sudden, and after I go to f1, he gave a check on f4, and it became clear to me that he's just forcing a perpetual. I have to go back to g1, because if I go to e2, again, my king is open, and the funny thing is, when I briefly calculated this, I thought that I was actually getting mated here. I thought check with the queen on d4, and I thought check and mate, but then I realized when I looked back after that in this position I can actually take the rook. So that wasn't it, but what he does have here is he can give this check and then take the bishop, and like my king ends up in the no man's land, and this pass pawn is not going to save me. I mean, a king this open, like, probably going to lose this, right? So what ended up happening was after this check, we shuffled back and forth, and basically game drawn by a threefold repetition. So yeah, that was a very, very crazy penultimate round. Finished in a draw. Was a little bit disappointed not to win. I felt like I had a very good position. I was pressing for a good chunk of the game. But maybe because I got low on time, I missed some things and kind of let my advantage slip away. And draw may be a fair result in the end. But I will definitely have to analyze the game in depth and kind of present to you the things that I missed. So here we go. Final round of the World Open. 4 out of 8 going into this. So a draw would, see me finish on 50%, which isn't awful. But preferably I wanted to win, 5 out of 9. Best I could have done at that point. And I got paired against a young kid, about like 12 or 13. And rating about 2,000 USCF. And here we go. So, the funny thing is, this is my 5th black game of the tournament. And the previous 4 games, I had faced d4 3 times, e4 only once. And like, I was a little bit concerned going into the tournament. I was like, I haven't really studied some of my e4 lines as in-depth as I wanted to before the tournament. And then I barely ever even faced e4. And I was thinking, okay, finally, this young kid, like most young kids play e4, right? Nope. He plays g3. And I'm like, what, dude, really? Okay. I'm still going to play d6. Bishop g2, e5, c4, and I played f5. This is kind of like my anti-g3, anti-English system, which, to be honest, is sharp, but like a lot of things I play, a bit positionally vulnerable. And here he played an interesting move. Like, usually people here will play knight c3, and sometimes they'll play d3, sometimes they'll play e3, knight g2, or knight f3. But he immediately played e4, which I thought was just weird. And maybe I should have just continued with my usual setup, just go knight f6 and bishop e7 castles. But I was like, okay, if you're going to go e4, I'm just going to take. And like, if he takes by bishop, I go knight f6, and I get a free tempo attacking his bishop. So he didn't do that. He played knight c3. I played knight f6. He played knight e2. And maybe I should have just played like bishop e7 and castles, but the fact that he wasn't taking the pawn gave me an interesting idea. And I played the move knight a6. And my idea was that if he now takes, then again I'm going to go knight c5, and I hit his bishop, and he can't go back to g2 because then I have this annoying check, and he can't castle now. And if he goes this way, well then he just abandoned this square, and like, it just makes him look foolish for fianchettoing the bishop. But he just castled, and I was thinking, okay, I can go knight c5 here, defend the pawn, but what if he just goes b4? Like, am I really going to go here and go out of my way to trade my knight for his bishop? Like, that doesn't really hurt him. Like, this position is probably just better for white. So eventually I decided to just finish developing, castle. And I should add, he was playing very fast. Like, this kid was, the first 10 moves, he barely spent any time. He did start to think around this point, but he was, like, making fast moves and then getting up and walking around constantly throughout the game. And it was a little bit annoying, not going to lie. And, like, he was also the kind of kid where he would get up, walk away, right? I would make a move. He would come back, and like after I played bishop e7, he came back and asked me, like, did you just play that? And I was like, buddy, like, what do you think? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, yeah, you're right. You don't need to ask. I did just play bishop e7. So yeah, a little bit of annoyance there, but he played knight c3 here, and I played c6 just to close down the diagonal. And now he played d4, which I thought was a good move on his part. You know, like, even though he played g3, kind of like this positional looking opening, he's playing it in a pretty aggressive way. Like, he's opening the center, and here I had a choice. Like, I can take the pawn or I can not. I was thinking that if I take and go, like, probably knight c7, I don't know. It just seemed like this position is a little bit passive to me. You know, I'm kind of stuck behind these pawns. And I wasn't really too sure about it. Now, in hindsight, I think it's actually just fine, because he can't even really bring his bishop out, because I'll just play knight e6 and fork him, and I'm doing just fine. You know, he's gonna have to, you know, trade his bishop off for my knight, and yeah, you know, I'm a little bit cramped, but I don't think it's gonna be too serious of an issue. Instead, I made a very positionally risky decision to bring the knight back, allowing this trade, which leaves me with the isolated king pawn, basically, IKP. You know, there's a lot of talk about the IQP, but what about the IKP? I have one now, and my idea was that, yeah, the pawn itself is a target, but it could help me to maneuver my knight and get it to d4 from where it'll be pretty strong. So he played queen e2, and I played knight e6, you know, preparing knight d4. But now he played bishop e3. And now I started to doubt whether I should really go for this, because if he takes and then puts me in a pin, it's kind of annoying. I can't really move my queen. And if I play c5 to defend the pawn, I was thinking he'll take and put his knight on d5, and I didn't like this. You know, he gets a nice square for the knight. Like, yeah, I have the pass pawn, but I can't really push it, and his knight is very well placed. I wasn't sure about this position. So I decided just to play, well, I first decided to trade the knights, and I played queen e8. And my idea was I'm going to get the queen to g6 and try to do some stuff on the king side, and still I have this idea in the back of my mind. But clearly somewhere around this point is where I went wrong, because up to this point, like, I was still doing fine, but probably this trade and this was just bad, because he played here and I played here. And this was also an interesting moment, because I was a little bit concerned at first. He was going to play knight d6, trying to basically trade his knight for my light square bishop. But then I realized I have a cool trick here. I can actually take the knight and then play knight d4. And the point is, it's actually a discovered attack on the rook and a double attack because I'm hitting his queen. And he can't take my queen because I will take his with check and then take his rook. So the best thing he can do at this point would be to sack the rook for knight and a pawn and get to this position where he has the bishop pair, but I'm up the exchange. So, like, probably slightly better for me. But in this position, he simply played the very mature prophylactic move king h1. And I began to realize that my position is just not good at all. I'm just stuck here. Like, I'm still having this weak pawn, and, like, what do I do? How do I get this bishop active? Like, I put my knight on e6, but it's blocking the bishop, and, you know, if I go here and sack a pawn and get the bishop out, he just moves his queen, and I'm thinking, like, just fine for white. If I go back, then maybe he goes into c5, and it's good for him. So I thought for a long time, like, honestly, like 20 minutes or so. I think I had about 40 minutes. Let's see. This was which move? Yeah, I had 44 minutes, and I went all the way down to 24. And I played knight g5, inviting a trade, which I was not happy about doing, because I realized that I might be losing this pawn now. And it's true. I mean, there's actually no way for me to directly save it, because now he goes rook e1, And now I realized, yeah, I'm losing the pawn, but I can still get some active counterplay. You know, being down a pawn isn't the end of the world here. If he takes, I was planning to, I was considering going rook e8, but this actually might be dangerous to give up the two rooks for the queen, because now my king is forced into some dangerous territory. But at the time I was thinking I was fine, but I was also looking at this idea. Queen d2. Invading a second rank. Putting pressure on the pawns, putting pressure on the rooks, and if he attacks me, I can just kind of like go here, and I'm actually like threatening rook e8. And I was thinking like that should be enough counterplay. But then he played h4. And so I thought, okay, kind of a weird move. Maybe he's trying to make room for his king, but I just play queen g6, and I'm threatening to go here and fork his queen and pawn. But then he took the pawn, and I realized that, wait a second, now if I play this move, he goes here. And I totally missed this. And I'm not actually winning the pawn because he's attacking my queen. And we ended up trading. And like, I don't know, maybe in this position I should have just not done that. Maybe just played like rook e8 or rook d8. I don't know, like, I was just kind of disappointed or annoyed with myself for losing the pawn, but honestly, it's just one pawn. And it's not enough of an imbalance for him to like have a big advantage. Like, I still have plenty of opportunities to make counterplay, but I don't know, I also maybe had it in the back of my mind that this kid is like not going to be good in the endgame, so I should trade down and I have a good chance to hold or even like somehow, swindle him. Which is kind of stereotyping, to be honest, to assume that a kid is not good in the endgames. He might have been drilling endgames for the past month with the Grandmaster coach, for all I know. But anyway, we ended up trading here. And like another moment where I don't know why I played the move queen f7. Because it just invites queen e6 with a queen trade. If I had just played queen h5 here, then if he gives the check, I just move the king and like, okay, he's up one pawn, but I constantly have some ideas of checking him. I just don't think that this position is easy at all to win for white. But I played the move back. He played here, and I thought, okay, at least I get my rook to this file. He has to watch that I don't invade the second rank. And I doubled, and he doubled, and I came in with the rook. And he obviously doesn't want to take because then I'm attacking the pawn. And, if by the time he gets here, I'm already taking, and I'm defending my pawn as well. And, I might even be able to overtake him if this happens. But he brought his king in. I defended my 7th rank, brought my king in, and now he played a very sneaky move. He played the move rook e3. And at first I was like, what is he doing? He's giving me the pawn? And then I realized that, of course, he has a trap here that he's trying to get me to fall into. If I take the pawn, he goes check. And I can't go back to g8 because this is mate. And as soon as I go to g6, I'm still getting mated because check, check, and checkmate. And he saw this so quickly. Like, he was pretty sharp, honestly. He played well. So I couldn't take. I played g6. He gave a check, and he pushed his pawn, getting his pawn out of the, attack from the rook. And so now I decided to play rook f7, and I was thinking, if we trade one set of rooks, I have this unopposed rook on the second rank, and it's going to be pretty hard for him to make progress. And I played h5, he played king f3, and now we get to this position, where I still have my rook placed, putting pressure on the pawn, and for him to win, like, what I was thinking he would have to do is, like, get his rook over here, and start to somehow, get the king over here, start pushing the pawns, but it's a very slow process, and it's not clear whether he would be able to win. He's obviously pretty strong, he knows what he's doing in the endgame, but I just don't think there was enough for him to win. And maybe what I should have done here is just played something like a5, just kind of like blockading him, making slow moves, or even just king f6. Can't really go wrong with getting the king a little more active. But no, I had to go into some thought here and play just an absolutely brain-dead move. b5. A move that lost me the game. I was thinking that we trade, and then I go here, and I'm going to pick the pawn back up, and I'm just simplifying things down. Like, I was thinking, okay, like, maybe he goes here, I take, I'm putting pressure on the pawn. If he were to go here, check, right, we trade, and 3-on-2, like, I was pretty confident I can hold this. And also, I was thinking, if he pushes a pawn, well, then I can trade, and then this pawn is actually loose. I can try to win it. But what I didn't calculate was that he can take once and play rook c3. And now he's threatening to both take my pawn and play here and win this pawn. And now I'm in trouble. Because if I take, he just takes back. And I'm actually in danger of losing this pawn. Because if I, for example, push it up, he just goes here. And by the time I attack his pawn, he takes mine and defends. If I bring my rook back, he just starts to advance his king. And now this is pretty bad. Like, he's getting his king active. So I played b4. Seeing that check, I win the pawn back. And we both have pass pawns. But what I failed to realize is that his king is so active now that he gives a check. And in this position, I actually just realized that I'm totally lost. Because if I move my king back, he just goes here. And I'm not anywhere near close enough with his pawn. He's going to give a check, and he is just going to absolutely clean up this side of the board. And then he's going to laugh at me by playing the rook here, and I can't even promote. So basically at this point, like, I was just so disappointed. I played king e7 and basically played for one last trick. I played the move rook d3, which is just so desperate. All it's doing is baiting him to take with the king, because this is the one way he can lose the game. Why? Because I have a check here. And I'm forcing the rook trade, and because his king is busy munching on these pawns, it's not fast enough to stop the pawn. And I can stop his pawn, but he can't stop mine. He might as well start pushing, but, you know, I'm going to get there first with the queen, and I should be winning this now. That was the one way he could have lost, but he, you know, exercised a little bit of caution and just played rook b6. And I gave a check, again, trying to bait him into taking with the king. He didn't do it. And in this position, I actually just resigned after he played f4, because I'm literally about to lose every single one of my pawns. Like, no joke. How do I even protect a single pawn? If I go here, he takes this guy, and then he's going to come around this way and start taking these pawns. Like, it is just a disaster. I was just so disappointed with the way I played in this game. And yeah, I resigned in this position. Finishing on only 4 points out of 9. You know, definitely not the best score. Fell short of, you know, I had a very ambitious goal for myself of 6.5, which, you know, in hindsight was a little bit much. You know, 6.5 would have landed me in, let me see, anywhere between 10th and 17th. There was actually like an 8-way tie, I think, for 6.5. There were a bunch of people there. So yeah, that would have been a very impressive score. But, you know, even 5, I think, would have been good. Like, if I had won this game or won one of the previous games, 5 points, I would have been relatively content with that. Before, I can't be happy with that, especially the way I played throughout the tournament. You know, the only games that I feel like I legitimately played well were the first game that I won, and, you know, this last game in round 8, which I drew, which, you know, I may have missed some winning chances, but I felt like I, you know, played decently well throughout. But the rest of the games I just think were a mess, and going to be a lot to learn from, going to have to be a lot of work put in. You know, I realized really to get my goals, to get up to 2,200, I'm going to have to really compete with these strong kids who are probably training with, like, IMs and GMs consistently and are, you know, picking up a lot of knowledge. So I'm going to have to, you know, really be more serious with my training. I've been playing too much blitz and not doing enough sort of calculation training, and even just like undervaluing those little things in classical chess that make a big difference, like time management, prophylaxis, and like knowing, you know, when to calculate and when to use your intuition. those are all things that I'm going to really have to address if I want to perform well in whenever my next tournament happens to be, whether if it's in probably August or maybe even September. We'll see. But yeah, I will be most likely making a follow-up video with sort of like one instructive moment from each game, sort of like my afterthoughts after I've really analyzed the games. So yeah, thanks for watching my recaps, and yeah, stay tuned for the follow-up.